Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns, and this is a place where we're trying to find some really rich dialogues with leaders who champion a holistic approach to employees and employee well-being at the workplace, and especially with the corporate culture having been a really rough place for a long time. We're now getting dragged into, as I was talking with my next guest, Jon Shreve, we were talking about, the Gen Z and Gen Xers are really dragging us into a more of a humanist place where the whole person shows up and we kind of appreciate and respect that whole person. So with that, Jon, welcome to the show. Again, thanks for taking time out of your busy day as a CEO to share a little bit about your views.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, as I promised, I'm usually the guinea pig. I told Jon before we're going to pull a couple of questions out of the jar and during the show, but I'm the first victim, so I wouldn't ask a guest to do something I wouldn't do. So kind of kick this off with a little question that I'll read. This is from my podcast called The Jar. Traveled around to interviewed 330 people in 96 cities over the last couple of years. Let's see. So my question is, who do you talk to when you need guidance? This is a great one for me because when I look at my business career, the one person, I kind of reverse answer this. The one person that I didn't get to talk to, the one person that I really wished I had an opportunity to talk to was my father. My father was a really good business person, very experienced, and it was an opportunity kind of lost. He passed away when I was 27. And so my first book design, it was called Dear Dad. And it was where you would actually go in and speak to call your father on those moments that I didn't have opportunities to because he wasn't there. And so I called it Dear Dad, and it'd be writing letters to my father, sharing moments, the highs and the lows of life.
Not very cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Jon, long time we had a good giggle offline. You being an actuary and myself being an insurance, on the sales side, the distribution side, and so tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the current role and what you're doing.
Yeah. So, and by the way, my father was a math professor, retired at age 74. And I always think, and maybe a little too soon. So it was, but he's still going strong. I
love that.
And sort of growing up, I, had a very strong math background, both nature and nurture, and figured out that I wanted to be an actuary. And actually, with a little bit of time, I figured out that I'm kind of a natural actuary. And by that, I mean, I kind of think in probabilities. So a lot of people are math people and they become actuaries, but I think I'm more actuarial than I am mathematical, right? So it's
interesting.
So I had one job out of college and then joined Milliman, which is an actuarial consulting firm. And was part of a practice in Philadelphia for a while, but then started my own practice in Denver many years ago. And the interesting thing about Milliman is in addition to the consulting work, it also allows you to, in effect, sponsor or invest in other practices that are inside of Milliman. And so after I became an equity principal, then I started sponsoring other practices. And one of them was the Milliman Care Guidelines. And there's a whole story about how that happened. But so I got involved with that first as an investor and chairman, and then later when we were having challenges on the management side as CEO, but on a part-time basis while I was also running my practice and other investments out of Denver. That was in 2007. In 2012, we kind of figured out the Milliman Care Guidelines didn't really fit with the rest of Milliman because we weren't a consulting practice. We were a product practice, and we went through a process, and and Hearst Corporation bought us, so I moved from. I thought I was going to retire at Milliman, moved over to Hearst as CEO of now MCG Health, gave up my continuing education on the actuarial side, so I'm no longer qualified to give statements of actuarial opinion, but I've been CEO and only had one job ever since we joined Hearst. So I had multiple jobs at Milliman, but just the one, and we've been growing pretty consistently since that time as well. So that's how I got to where I am.
And tell us, what is MCG Health doing?
Yeah, so MCG writes, well, there's sort of a couple layers of it, but number one, we were established inside of Milliman as the authors of guidelines. So what are the appropriate things to do in healthcare? And insurance companies and health systems, hospitals purchase these guidelines from us. And we've kind of ended up being the language that they share when they're having discussions about what should be paid for and not paid for and so forth. So we're kind of the trusted entity in the middle of those two folks. And then, so that was the originally what we did. And then we've gradually become more of a technology company as well. So first putting the guidelines into case managers' workflow, but now we're really in the midst of combining really more automated solutions so that the computer can look at an electronic medical record and say, yeah, this person is in a status that's consistent with inpatient. Here's the reasons why, or here's the things that are missing in it, and really simplifying that process. And the large language models that are coming will simplify that even further as we go through it. But we've already taken case manager job in a hospital and moved it from maybe 15 minutes to review a case down to 1 minute to review a case by automating these pieces. So it's I sort of say in my orientation presentation, I say we started as a content company, then became a product company, and now we're a healthcare technology company.
And you're a healthcare tech company.
Yeah.
It's great. What you just we could have a total side conversation on what you just described. My last role was working for a life company, and a lot of health products in Asia, life and health, and a lot of the claims that would come in. We had some real challenges on the claims processing, and exactly what you just talked about. How long it takes someone to look at a claim, and are they able to approve it at that level, or do you have to show it to a manager? So I just went through this whole redesign. We started from the scratch, from when the accident happens or when the medical event happens, and what's the customer experience, and doing it from the customer viewpoint.
Yeah, and the providers without this will send in the 60-page document, and then that drives the payers nuts, or they'll send in not enough information. And so it's just helping both sides communicate better so that they can get to the right decisions. Because in the end, it's we sort of the reason we're trusted is the guidelines are written from the patient point of view.
Yes,
and so both sides are willing to trust us, given that we're doing this independent, patient-centered viewpoint of what should be happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. Quite often we hear, in my travels, especially when I, get back to the US and talking to people, about sometimes insurance companies and claims and, some frustrations, or the looking at insurance companies as the boogeyman in a way at times. And I just used to, I tell people my own experience in 6 different insurance companies on, several different countries. We're in the business to pay claims.
Yeah.
We like to pay claims. we don't look for reasons to deny claims. We look for reasons to pay claims,
That's right.
typically.
That's right.
And that's the culture I've seen at every country and every operation I've walked into, is how can we pay this?
Yes.
Is
Yep.
really the, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's I kind of say there are the insurers who aren't paying things that they should, and there are also providers who are doing things that they shouldn't, right? And so
Absolutely.
so to get to the right answer for the patient, you're balancing those things.
Yeah.
And it's not a one side bad, one side good. It's both sides pretty good with their foibles.
You're becoming a tech company now. You're in Washington. You're in the tech. You're in a techie area.
Yeah.
Did you go remote during COVID, and have you come back? And how are you gonna?
Yes.
How, as a leader, how does that look for you?
Yeah, so I'll say before COVID, we were about 50% remote.
Okay.
So all the editors who write the guidelines, the salespeople,
Mm-hmm.
the account managers, the clinical educators, so we had this big group of people who were remote. And so we were used to that format. And then with COVID, everybody went remote. The primary people who were coming into the office in Seattle were the developers, the product management, and then more corporate functions, finance, HR, etc. And we went remote. We have we've gone to very hybrid, and the way we've set it up is we have 1 week a month that we call MCG week. And we say, that's the time to come into the office. And we're not saying you must come in the office, but that's the time to come into the office.
That's the time. Yeah.
Right. And so where I used to go to Seattle about halftime, now I go 1 week a month because it won't do me any good the rest of the time.
So yeah, nobody there.
And we have sort of enhanced things. We have things that we started this year. We're calling them glue events. So pouring the glue back in as we're separated. That can be fun or volunteer, or next month we'll have a speaker on the generational differences, or so we have these different events that sort of go with coming in during MCG week. But the technology folks are still mostly in Seattle, and they get together a little more often, and the teams will meet up and so forth. But more and more of them are also throughout the country. So it's a balancing act as we go forward. But we're not, especially for technology, I kind of see what we were doing before as saying, come into the factory floor and work on your programs.
Okay.
And you don't really need to be there to do that. So it's so the reason to be in the office is collaboration, and you need to make sure there's enough of it, but you don't need to come in just to work. That's there's enough commuting time in Seattle that's that's too much overhead to come in and just do things you can do at home.
How do we maintain the culture or establish? I think for you, had a culture, so it's not an establishment, but this must be a conversation with yourself.
Yeah. So. And that's an example. The glue events are an example of us saying
trying to find
how do we keep this together? It is a very strong culture, and it's an extremely supportive culture. So people, the thing that new employees say to me most often, after a few months being here, is people here are so nice or so helpful, and you can find that remotely as well as not. But I do worry about, like hiring someone out of college and saying work at home. What does that mean? They don't have enough experience to know what that should be.
Yeah.
By nature, we're kind of an older company because we hire clinicians who already have been in practice, and then now we're transitioning to this. And but there are other areas like software where you don't need to hire them, where you could hire out of college and should.
Yeah.
So it's so you have to pay a little more attention there. But there are people who are who are relatively new, like, why do I need to come in? And it's like, well, but people who've been here a long time look forward to the times they come in.
Yeah. To touch base with people they know they had a relationship with.
Yep.
What advice would 2019 Jon, or what would I maybe reverse it? What advice would 2024 Jon give 2019 Jon?
I'm not sure. It's we haven't modified that much. Of course, I'd say watch out for next year. But
exactly. Crystal ball is something's coming.
That's right. But yeah, it's
it's a tough question, because you have to, you've got to think of what we know now versus what we knew then. I think strictly from maybe a culture standpoint and business, obviously not try to get COVID out of there, but maybe from the human side of how I can look back. I would share my own version of this, which is, had I known now from the human side, what I didn't know then, I wish I knew then what I know now about people and humans, especially around the whole person showing up to the office, and some of my interactions or some of my conversations with leadership around particular people and how they perform the role. And and had I been a bit more of a humanist, I might have led the teams or had those the conversation would have definitely been structured differently.
And even in 2019, 2018, whatever, I remember there was one event where we have a group of nurses who are our clinical educators, so they go out and teach our clients how to use the guidelines and software and so forth. And I would say that group had the most extreme variation in political view. So far left, far right, and tension was kind of bubbling up there. And the leader of that group just did a fantastic job, and she got everyone together and in effect reminded them of what we do as a company and how everyone in the room was aligned on what we're doing
on this piece.
Right. So let's focus on who we are and what we do. And through the process, I'm sure she had some other steps, kind of diffused sort of the political side of the group, because it was the full spectrum you can imagine, right?
Well, and they're the most impacted, right? They were out. It's not like they could stop doing their job. They had to somehow get out there and talk to people.
Right, and this was all before COVID, so they were.
Okay, interesting.
And at that time, they were all. This part has changed because of our clients have changed, but they were all road warriors at the time, so they were just on site helping people learn things and so forth, and actually we're heading back in that direction, but hospitals want us there on site again. The payers, not as much, because they're still mostly remote, so they're not saying come in and train us. They're saying, here's our online presence, and bring people together that way. So it's healthcare by nature is not a remote business. So
so if it does get remote, I'm going to be a little bit nervous.
That's right.
They said robot will be knocking at the door to take my blood and to, do a body scan and then run, and then hook up to my Wi-Fi, and away that we go.
That's right.
What are that does kind of lead me to the next question. Interesting. You talked about the language models and the, becoming more of a tech company. Where is this going to go? How fast are you? Is this something you're going to really go into and become a kind of an efficiency player and a tech in a kind of a governance person, and then also becomes an efficiency aspect to this?
Yeah, I think it's the interesting part, if you compare us to tech companies, is having the guidelines and the clinical sort of expertise and purity at the core of what we're doing actually leads the tech to some much stronger answers than you could do if you don't have that infusion of it.
Yes. Interesting.
And so our first version of this was for this is where the case managers became much more efficient. So the old world was the case manager had to open up the electronic medical record and say, oh yeah, this person is hemodynamically unstable, or whatever the thing that you're looking for is, and document that and send it on to the payer and also record it in the EMR. But if you can, so our first, before the large language models, our first version of that was there's lots of codification inside the EMR, and so if you could say, look for that particular code that indicates this, or and the interesting part is if you said, oh, the vital signs have to be an elevated, some measure over this period of, and our guidelines maybe weren't that precise, but now the codifiers went to the doctors and say, well, what does that mean? And so it's made it tighter around what it actually means to read that. And so you can read what's in the EMR. And we have some stuff where we use natural language processing to pull out concepts, but the large language models, the data science people say, well, that sort of commoditizes a lot of the AI, because you can just ask it to say, does this match this? And find that, and you got to train it enough that it's not imagining things, but you get to a place where those will be used as well. And it's kind of in conjunction with the coding to get to a place where you can make some very good decisions. And of course, the what everyone's worried about is the robot comes in and says no, that's denied, and we don't let that happen. It's the robot can say yes, go ahead, but if it's no, then you say to the human, no, take a look at this. So it's so you got to combine that.
Yeah, it is interesting. That process you described. When you get to the code people, they do really need this kind of exact science, right? The language. Yeah. It's a great. I find sitting down designing software solutions really fun, because they are like the actuaries in a way, right? These kind of coders. They're really detailed, and and they force you to go through, you break your process down in such minutia.
Yeah. Although I would say that's not actuaries, but that's some actuaries are that way. But I feel like it's the big picture you really need as the actuary. And don't get too lost in the details.
Yeah, that's the natural actuary speaking. Right. Because the math ones do take it out 7 decimals.
Want to find everything.
Yeah. That's right. There's your business sense, and those are business. That's more of a business actuary, right? You need both. You need both kinds, but you do need the ones that can be in the room. Mm-hmm. All right, John, let's kick things off with the jar.
See what these things are.
Yeah, let's see what the universe has got in store for you this morning. Okay, for fun. Are we hardwired to prejudge people?
I think
hardwired to prejudge people.
Yeah, I think the evidence shows yes, that you naturally come to conclusions about people.
Yeah.
But what I've observed is that a common interest can get you past a lot of that, right? So, so where we have employees with big differences, sort of like the story I was telling you. By having the common interest, you can sort of get past the surface stuff that you might prejudge on. And I even see it. So my hobby, by the way, is playing competitive Scrabble. And I even see it in the Scrabble world. So it's like, these are people who you wouldn't interact with normally, but once they know their Scrabble stuff, you're ready to, then you're talking with them on that level. So it's, and the challenge is doing that more broadly. And I think that, that it is human nature to be worried about that, and we have to sort of challenge ourselves not to.
And this does kind of come back to that, the great part about being in an office and have the culture and having something you're aligned to, a mission, where everybody's coming in, you're trying to, provide the best claims experience for your partners and their clients. It is interesting that when we don't have that stuff, we do kind of revert back to these assumptions, right?
That's
I think
right.
the pre-wired part is really assuming the person is this or that, or, I know where they're from. I know what they drive, or how they dress, or how they walk, and I'll start to paint. I'll paint the rest of that in for me. Don't worry. Let me. I'll sort out who you are.
That's right.
And I do like, as soon as you find a common. I like what you say about the Scrabble. As soon as you find a good common thing, then actually you start to realize that some of the stuff doesn't matter.
That's right.
The small stuff, because you've got something, especially around work. That's one of the reasons why I like the idea, the jar at the office, because everybody has, as you sit around the table, you've got, little icebergs, like I was saying, and I have my title on my forehead and my role description. And then, underneath that are the interactions we've had with each other. And that's, and I may know a little bit about you, but really it's very surface. And so I think, what happens with the jar is, you find things out about people and you make those connections to the real person. And you've got some empathy for each other and some, start to accept people for who they are.
That's right.
Or who you think they are. And because you've got some human side of it. Where do you think we are in a few years with remote, and how do you think this is going to come out from the economy side? Will we see data that says people are better off, remote, or a mix, or does it depend on the industry?
Yeah. So people better off versus companies better off. So during COVID itself, you could see all kinds of struggles, and whether it was, trying to deal with a whole bunch of small kids, or whether it was someone living alone, or whether, so sort of different types of problems, but you could really see it coming out. And I think there's hangover of that still, that probably, it might be worth talking about. Here's good reasons to come in, in effect for your own good. But when I think about from a company point of view, the way we have it designed right now, I'm not imagining that we change all that much over the next couple of years. We'll do variations as we figure out, oh, this works better than that. But from a more bureaucratic point of view, we say, well, here are the positions that are remote. Here are the positions that it's Seattle preferred, and here's the positions Seattle required. Seattle required, by the way, might be 20 people out of 450. So kind of, as knowledge workers, as opposed to people making widgets, or treating patients, I don't see where we get benefit from making people get together without that collaboration purpose. And there's great benefit to getting people together for the collaboration purpose. And so it's, you should get together as much as you need, but not more.
I like that. I love that. Right. Especially, don't come to the office just to coming to the office. There should be some purpose behind this.
And some people, by the way, just sort of like, I'm so bored at home, I want to be in the office. Oh, that's great, right? So it's but in terms of, you're a programmer, come in and do your work here. No, there's not really much.
Don't have to. Yeah, we don't have to.
No.
Yeah, it's the walkabout management style.
Mhm.
Walking the floor,
Right,
right?
right.
Get out of your office and spend an hour, go say hi to people and walk around. And interesting. Now it's more. I think you can do that same thing with these little catch ups, a
Yep,
Zoom call,
yep.
15 minutes with this person, 15 minutes with that person, and
And when
truly
we
connect.
redesigned our office, we got rid of offices. So, um, because it was like, we don't need you to come in and sit in your office. We need you to come in and collaborate. So so we have lots of meeting space, and then some cubes you can sit down at
Yes. Yeah.
if you're not there. But it's not. Um, Again, that's not the point of being there. So we don't worry as much about that.
Yeah. I was in a couple of roles where they were just mostly distribution areas, and they had just
Mhm.
wiped out the offices,
Yep.
just knocked those walls down, knocked the doors out, and just a few guest offices where you could go and sit. But generally, the idea was go find an open space and plug in.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
idea is you'd end up sitting next to somebody different, somebody maybe you hadn't met and somebody you hadn't seen in 6 months, and you know, catching up. And like you said, the ideas and the collaborate. I'm still a big fan of getting together and being with each other.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
and you got to do that. It's just
I
how
just
much you
love
got to
that
do it,
part.
right?
All right, let's find another one for you.
Okay.
That one took us down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Okay. Okay, a little peek into your organizational tactics. You
Okay.
keep a daily to-do list.
Yes. The and there's a much deeper answer than that. So
Let's go.
on a monthly basis, I I take a list. This is the actuary coming out of right
Yes.
now. It's 100 priorities,
Okay.
and I have a ranking algorithm I use on it to say which are most important.
Okay.
And I do that by like comparing five of them together and say 4, 3, 2, 1, 0,
Which
you know,
one? Okay. Oh,
and
and
then
you keep. Oh,
and
very cool.
resorting them, and the
Yeah.
fours
Yeah.
go against the fours and so forth.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
and I've figured out, which, again, the actuary side, which should 4, 1, 3 be above or below 3, 2, 4, whatever.
Yeah.
So I know that, but I rank it, look at my time I have available to work on things. Usually I take 25 or so um, the priorities out of that. Then um, I spread those over the weeks of the month,
Okay.
uh, and kind of mix them in with. Actually, I do the things I need to do personally as well as in work, um, and I kind of scramble them, and it's a combination of some ranking and some randomization, so that things that maybe I wasn't expecting will pop up to the top, and
Yep.
I work on those. And so every day I have that list that's been fed by the monthly priority list that's
Yep.
somewhat randomized, and then that's what I work
That sounds like a book right there.
on. If it would drive other people nuts to try and do it that way, but
I,
they
I don't know. I don't know. I kind of identify with it. I think that's like, so, you could hold that class for the office.
yeah, there you go.
This. I love that idea. You got 100, and then you start to and you take just 5 random ones, and then just pit them again. They just do a battle off, and
Yep, yep.
then the top ones keep going against each other.
And I will do that, by the way. So we're getting into, as we get into budget season, people have all these ideas about what we should be doing.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course. We got
but,
we're
and
gonna
I
do.
and I get the executive team, and they think it's kind of funny now, but I'll get the executive team and I'll make them do the same thing. I'll say,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
here's 5. What are the high to
Right.
low? Which one should we be focused on? And then shuffle and re-rank. And we usually come out, and then we look at it, and I say, this isn't a precise order. This is a rough order.
Yes, yes.
And they'll pretty quickly say, well, these bottom 15, we can cut them right now. And then as we're getting into budget, we'll consider these top ones. And so it sort of forces forces decisions about, and I think, by the way, strategy is sort of deciding what you're not going to do as much as deciding what you're going to do. So it's
funny.
So I use that system on myself, and then I use it where we need to in the company.
Drag the team through it as well.
That's right.
I like that statement that strategy is much about deciding what not to do and where to put the resources. It's by July and August, all of a sudden that what we're going to focus on list, boy, that gets tight. You're down to one or two things. These are the things we got to execute.
Yep.
And it's funny how.
And by the way, our company, our biggest problem is how much stuff people start. So it's because it's really a mission-driven company, so everybody gets the right care. People are passionate about getting to that point, and they'll see something that needs to get done, and they'll start it without recognizing that 5 other people are affected, and we need to do more and more prioritization. And we're working hard on that right now of what can we cut out, and including we'll have a process. People put in place processes to add things to the list, and the result of that process is people don't try to add it to the list; they just do it.
Yeah.
So we're iterating.
I haven't gotten to that yet. Oh, well, what have you been working on? Well, I have this thing. Did I tell you, John?
Exactly. Yep.
And you're like, where did that come from?
Right. And then the people working on the top priorities get pulled into these other side projects and don't have time to get the top one. No, I didn't get my top priority done. Oh, hold on, and so I'm even wondering, some people think, well, I'll go to the meeting just to support them and not do anything else. But before you know it, they have too many meetings and they still don't get their top priority done.
Oh boy, that's funny. Yeah, as you're speaking through that, I'm having some visions of some roles and places I've been where I realize, I'm in a meeting and I'm going, this isn't even on our strategic list. Why are all these people in here? And
that's right.
Holy cow, we've dragged IT in here. You start really when IT's in the room, you're like, no, that's not good. Those people are busy.
Yep.
Yeah, those people are busy. I love that story. Just trying to keep the machine pointed in the right direction and all the resources on the most important stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Not easy. Let's try another one. That was pretty good. That brought out a good, that gave us a good conversation right there. I like that one. How are you doing so far? All right.
Doing fine.
No, nothing too, okay. Here's one. Do you have a song? It's more like a human one. Do you have a song that's too painful to listen to?
No. I don't.
I don't know where that. Yeah,
I don't listen to music all that much, so I am sort of, let's say, mushy by nature, and so I'll listen to some songs. I can't think of any right now, but
okay.
It'll make me tear up a little bit just listening to it. But it's not painful. It's more. It's more. I guess more joyful than.
So you like the little mushy part.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier. I had a question. I lost the question for a moment. It's kind of come back, or a comment, and you're talking about people, whether it's scope creep or it's just mission creep, or people uncover something they're passionate about. They run off and start trying to solve it without sneaking it onto the list. And I was speaking with Ali Khan. He's the CEO of a company called Shape. Okay. And I think I'd spoken a little bit about them. They do the employee surveys, and it's around flourishing. And really what they're measuring is the company flourishing ultimately? And it's really about 4 parts, the human showing up, and then the second part is that playground that you provide, where they perform the work and what that looks like. And then it's that experience that they get. Their boss, their coworkers, their own kind of mission and the clarity of what they do. And then that last part is, how serious the company is about doing what they say they're doing. They want to do. Is there alignment? Basically, is there alignment?
Yeah.
And so they measure 12. They measure 12 points inside those four pieces, and and Ali's such an incredibly intelligent person, and kind of an engineer and software engineer by life experience. But we were talking, and he was saying, and then we've got this other, and they just launched, and the product is amazing, and it's I've never seen a management tool like it. And we're talking to him, and he's still saying, and we've got this other client, and they want this feature, and that's going to be coming out. And we had that, and as he was talking, I was going, Ali, you have too much money and too much time and too many engineers.
Right.
Your time, you have to shut some of that down. And we had a good giggle about it. And he was saying, yeah, I recognize that at times, but also there, but did I tell you what we're solving?
Yeah. No, and we, so we'll have one client wants this, one client wants that.
Yes.
And it's figuring out which are the things they're requesting that other people want too, not just them. So it's so in the in the language of marketing, the pervasiveness of the request.
Ooh, I like that. The pervasiveness.
Yeah.
And then of course the persuasiveness of who's ever preaching for it.
Yeah. Well, but if you're trying to sort of it's a framework called pragmatic marketing, and I'm trying to remember. It's pervasiveness. There's another one, willingness to pay. And so if you look at doing something, putting it through that lens of and there's a third one that I don't recall, but putting it through that lens that really helps you sort out what are the things we really need to be doing right now versus what are the one-offs that could distract you.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that comes back to a lot of that. You would sort that out in your methodology.
Yeah.
As things go up against each other, right? It's for one account, or is it for, the market in general?
Right.
Yeah. It was a great conversation we had. And they said, Ali's in kind of an incredible designed program. And I'm just a big fan. I'm just a big fan of it. So but it was fun. I was having one of those, managing my IT team moments, where clear, all right, your budget's too much and you have too many people, clearly. We have to look at that quickly. Oh, no, okay. But it is kind of fun. IT people really, when they get excited and they see a problem and they're in that creative space of solving it, just fun to watch.
Right.
Fun to watch that geniusness. Okay, another one for you. What does manifestation mean to you? These are some tough ones.
Yeah. So normally I think of manifestation of sort of the embodiment of something, but I'm not thinking it. So I don't have a deep answer for you there. It's just a definition.
Yeah. Back to your Scrabble moment.
Yeah. And by the way, in Scrabble, you don't worry about definitions so much.
Yeah. But I would imagine that goes through your mind, right? When you're looking at the word, or maybe not. I don't know what goes through a Scrabble.
As I get older, I've learned that learning the meanings of words helps me remember them.
Yes. Yeah.
When I was younger, I would just say, yeah, that's word, without needing to know what they meant.
What's your next competition?
I have just a local one in Colorado next month. I just came off of one in Phoenix over President's Day weekend, which I won. So I was happy with that. I was in the expert division. I was the number 6 seed, and I was lucky enough to beat out the other folks in that one.
And so set the stage. How does this happen? How many people show up, and what's the room like?
So the whole tournament's about 80 people, and then they divide it into divisions. So the top division, and this particular one, likes the way they run the tournament is round robin. So there was 18 of us in the expert division, and we played a round robin. And then 3 more games based upon what your records are. and so I was leading at the end of the round robin.
Okay.
And it turns out the guy I played last, I played him again in the next game because he was closest, and I beat him 2 games in a row.
Oh,
So now I was 2 games ahead of him, and 2 games I was 15-3, and 2 games ahead of another guy. So I played the other one, and he beat me. So now I was 1 game ahead of him.
oh, now it's tightening up. Okay.
And so I play him again because the first guy lost his game at the same time. Otherwise, I probably would.
Okay. Otherwise,
Yeah. And in that last, and then he beat me again. But the tiebreaker beyond record is your cumulative point spread. And to win the tournament, he needed to beat me by 144 points in the last game, and he beat me by 2. So I still won the tournament.
Whoa. And what are the people first? Did you win anything other than bragging rights? You get a trophy?
There is a
$50.
This one was $1,000, but your expenses going are more than that.
I was going to say, I don't think that covers your expenses, probably, right?
So it's not something you do for the money, but and the people. It's sort of when you're in the top division, the best players tend to have more of a mathematical background than a word background.
Why is that?
So what I like to say is Scrabble is a math game, really probability game, with the dictionary as a rule book. So it's just the dictionary just tells you what words you're able to play, or the word list, and
how you deploy it is a mathematical probability.
Yeah.
And are you thinking too defensively much in this game, or is it get to that level of very defensive as well as?
Yeah. It's so if you get ahead, so you play all your letters. It's called the bingo.
Yeah.
And it's 50-point bonus. So if you get a bingo or 2 early in the game and you're ahead, then your objective becomes closing down the board in a fashion that your opponent can't play a bingo to catch back up to you. And if you're on the opposite side of that, then you're looking at how to open up the board so that you can.
Yes.
And there's even a further variant on that, which is there are sort of high scoring non-bingo plays, 30, 40 points, and there are bingos, which might be 60, 70 points. And if you're ahead, you want to keep the board open for the 30 or 40 point play so you can consistently score and stay ahead. And if you're behind, you want to keep it open for the big play, for the bingo, which have sort of different board setups. So you're playing sort of in different ways to get to that endpoint.
That is very interesting. You get to a point where, as far as words go and the word bank and what you can do, everybody knows all the words, right? Everybody already knows what
we know 95+% of them.
Yeah.
So there can be challenges at the margin, but yeah.
So really, like you said, I like that. It becomes a mathematical play on how to score the most points, and also not leave yourself open to counter. I don't know, counter attack or counter word play or what.
Right. Yep.
Oh, fascinating word. Do you have any nemesis? Like in the whole country, there can't be that many people at this level.
Yeah,
you must know a lot of them.
I know a lot of them. I don't have anyone that I'd say, oh, that's my nemesis. There is one guy who's much better than I am, who I consistently beat. I think by luck, not by skill, and he's moved to a different to an international dictionary, so I don't play him much anymore. But
I like that. He's out. He's like, I can't get past this John guy.
No, that's the highest level of Scrabble that he moved on to. So it wasn't related to me, but he was So he was feeling that I somehow his nemesis or whatever. That I would.
Oh, you were his. You feel like you might have been his nemesis,
right? Because I would beat him. Even though I was a lower rated player, I would beat him the majority of the time. So it's
I would imagine he comes and sits looks at the draw and sees your name there and comes to the table and he's like, oh.
Yeah. And and he plays well, and it just things happen. So yeah.
What's the demographics?
It's tending older now, although we're getting young people into it. But in the expert division, it's mostly male, probably average age 50 to 60.
Should be, yeah.
The best players are probably 30 to 40, though. And then as you get to the lower division, it's much more women who are treating it more as a social activity.
Yeah, they're good. They're good at the words. They got the dictionaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And someone figured out something where the difference was the women weren't as willing to spend the time learning all the words.
Huh.
So it's so they enjoyed the game, but don't want to do the amount of work that would take to know 95% of the words in the dictionary.
Also that killer, sometimes that killer instinct,
Mm-hmm.
because it's got to be pretty strenuous. I mean, like it's got to be some pressure going on. I would imagine at some of those tables when you get to the expert division and you're sitting down. That's
and by the way, I'd say there's a big difference in demeanor among players. So if you can keep calm through it, which I'm pretty good at, that helps. And others, if things don't go their way, will start melting down some, and they worse when they start. So it doesn't do any good. You got to just say, you got to focus. It's like the when the sports guys say one game at a time. It's sort of it's even what is the best play on this rack right now, and that's your only question.
Yeah,
and you spend time on that, and then you and don't get wound up in but I'm so unlucky, or I'm whatever. It's
there are so many studies when you look at the brain and brain activity. When you get out of congruence, right? When your heart and your breath and your mind fall out of balance, your brain, if you take a brain scan of people in that moment where they're where they're unhappy with the draw or unhappy with what they've got on the slate, your brain's misfiring.
Yep.
And this is I've been studying in this pursuit of flourishing life now that I'm kind of living, and it's understanding a lot about about gratitude, and how to bring that to the workplace, how to help people in those moments. So whether it's at a Scrabble table or it's at the boardroom or it's in front of a client, it is about appreciating the moment, appreciating the opportunity you've got, and that allows you to think more clearly.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right.
I had an interview yesterday, conversation. I was, I'm hoping to do it's director work for a small community center, but it is a bit of, as I say, it's not charity work because they're going to pay me, but still it was an interview with the board and, some of the people who would report to you and, people you kind of report to the board as a executive director. And I found, boy, I hadn't had an interview in, I don't know, 100 years.
Sure, I haven't either.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine tomorrow, right? You're going to interview for a role, and I found myself kind of going, oh, my heart rate's a little. Check my watch, my heart rate's a little elevated, and I thought, well, that is just goofy. I'm not. It's not like a live and die kind of a thing, and I'm doing this for fun, but also for doing good and doing a little bit of work, and but getting my head and my heart aligned. Kind of getting the breath work back. And I was like, all right, I'm back to kind of a more I'm closer to flourishing than I was 5 minutes. I was fluttering a couple of minutes ago. Now I'm back to closer to flourishing.
All
right, let's find you one more closer. And
okay.
Then, we might well be at the end, pretty close. Oh, it's one of my favorite questions, John. And this is a little heavy, and this is pretty heavy for you.
Okay.
And I think this, the kind of the background of these questions. I wrote all these questions, 444 of them,
Hmm.
and I used my book to do it, as I was kind of describing the topics to you from before that were in the jar. And this one for me is kind of a framing, like a life framing question, but it's a not a spiritual question, but it is a kind of universe question. So I'll just read it. Do you feel the weight of the trust and expectations the universe has put on us? So I'll read it again for you. Do you feel the weight of the trust and expectations the universe has put on us?
I'd say it's yes and no. So,
Yeah.
so the no side is I'm a pretty even-keeled guy.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't feel it's in any particular situation. I figure out what the right thing to do is, and I do it, and you just and it doesn't feel like pressure. It just feels like, and some of that I think is I benefit from my position that I don't have to very often say, what does someone else think? Although I'm listening to everybody, I don't have to say I'm going to be second guessed, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the no side. The yes side is I sort of big philosophy of life is do your best at everything you attempt to do. So I'm always so that maybe it's still no, because that's not the weight the world's put on me. It's the weight I put on myself, right? So
it's your own inner voice.
Yeah. So I'm not in a mode where I'm spend my time thinking sort of that side of things I'm kind of in my consulting practice, and maybe at MCG, my wife used to say to me, you're creating this world, everyone else is living in it. And so it's sort of it's pretty internal. It's not external.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, not taking that kind of pressure on unnecessarily, worrying about things we can't control.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think that question is really interesting. Hearing your answer, it's always fun for me. As I wrote the questions, I was in a particular shoes. I was in a particular set of shoes, and I wrote them from my own point of view.
Sure.
And they meant, the way I wrote it, it meant something to me. I had an angle from which I was looking at the question. And so to see somebody else's point of view and to hear the way they framed the question, even starting with that, it's beautiful for me because it's a different question.
Right. Yeah. It's not I'm sure that question could go many ways in terms of what people think about it.
Yeah. And I think it's a great lesson for all of us, right? Is even something simple, that question is quite complex. But some of these questions are so simple, but to hear people interpret them and, my mouth kind of falls open, realizing, wow, there aren't 444 questions in the jar. There's 4 million questions in the jar, because everybody's going to look at it slightly differently. And then certainly, obviously, the answers are life experience or just life views. And we may answer the question one way today and a completely different way on another time. Jon, thanks so much for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
It was fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for listening and supporting The Humanist. If you're catching us on an audio version, drop down and give us a rating. And if you have anything, any beautiful comments or any thoughts, there's a spot down there for comments, and we read all those and take good ideas on board. Jon, hang around for 20 seconds, and I'll see you on the other side.
Okay.
Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of